Be me, Eddie, just a regular guy in my late 20s. Got a decent job, a small apartment, and most importantly, a solid group of friends. There were about 5 or 6 of us who were the core crew. My best friend since forever was David. Then there was Chris, who was always brutally honest, and a couple of other guys. Our circle was our sanctuary. After a long week of dealing with work nonsense, all you wanted to do was unwind with people who got you. That was us. Friday nights were sacred. Usually meant pizza, a case of something cheap, and hours of video games at my place or David's. Saturdays were for BBQs if the weather was good, or maybe we'd catch a game at a sports bar. Simple stuff. No drama, no stress. The whole point was to turn your brain off for a while. We'd make dumb jokes, talk about movies, complain about our bosses, the usual. Our girlfriends, when we had them, usually understood the dynamic. They were welcome to hang out, and most of them did. They'd either join in or just chat on the side. It was easy. David had been single for a while, after a pretty messy breakup a year or so back. He'd been down in the dumps for a bit, but he was finally getting back out there. So when he told us he'd met someone new and it was getting serious, we were all genuinely happy for him. He said her name was Paula, and he was totally smitten. Described her as cool, smart, and funny. Said she was different from anyone he'd dated before. We were all eager to meet her. The first time he brought her to one of our get-togethers was for a BBQ at my place, maybe late in the spring. First impressions were, honestly, amazing. She wasn't shy or awkward. She walked right in, shook everyone's hand, and had a big, genuine smile. She brought a really good homemade potato salad, which immediately scored points. Throughout the afternoon, she just fit. She laughed at Chris's dumb stories, asked my buddy Mike about his new car, and didn't even flinch when we started arguing about a stupid play in a baseball game. David was beaming the whole time, looking like he'd won the lottery. Later that evening, we moved inside to play some Mario Kart. This was usually the point where new girlfriends would politely tap out and go scroll on their phones. Not Paula. She grabbed a controller and said, "I call Yoshi." And she wasn't just playing to be polite. She was actually good, like third place consistently good. She was competitive, but in a fun way, trash-talking right back at us. We were all impressed. After she and David left, the verdict was unanimous. Chris, our resident cynic, even said, "Okay, she's cool, David did good." For the next few months, it was like a golden age for our friend group. Paula became a regular fixture. She made our hangouts even better. She'd suggest new board games to try, or find some new brewery for us to check out. She remembered little details about everyone. She asked me how my sister was doing after she'd been sick. She got Chris a gag gift related to an inside joke. It felt like she was really making an effort to be part of the group, not just David's girlfriend. He was happier than I'd ever seen him. He told me privately that he felt like he'd finally found the one, and we all believed it. We were all rooting for them. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment things started to change. It wasn't like a switch flipped. It was more like a slow, creeping fog. The first weird moment was probably during a game night at Chris's apartment. We were playing some dumb party game where you have to give joke answers to prompts. One of the prompts was something like, "What's a man's greatest weakness?" Chris, trying to be funny, wrote down, "Trying to read a map while a woman is talking." It was a stupid, harmless joke, the kind of thing we'd say all the time. Everyone chuckled, but Paula didn't. She just had this tight, thin smile on her face. When it was her turn to read her answer, she said, "I wrote the patriarchy, but I guess casual misogyny works too." The room went completely silent. Nobody knew what to say. It was so out of character. Chris just kind of shrugged awkwardly and moved on to the next card. But the mood had definitely shifted. It was the first time an invisible line had been drawn in the room. We all just ignored it, figured she was having an off day, or maybe the joke just landed wrong for her. But then little things started happening more frequently. A few weeks later, we were all watching an old 80s action movie, a classic we'd all seen a dozen times. It's full of cheesy one-liners and explosions, pure, mindless fun. About halfway through, there's a scene with the token female side character in a ripped tank top. Paula sighed loudly and said, "Can we pause it for a second?" David, ever the dutiful boyfriend, paused the movie. She then launched into an unsolicited lecture about the male gaze in cinema, how the camera angles were designed to cater to men, and how it was a prime example of female objectification. We just sat there, staring at the frozen screen, listening. It wasn't that she was necessarily wrong, but the time and place felt off. We weren't in a film studies class. We were 6 friends trying to watch a dumb movie and eat popcorn on a Saturday night. When she finished, there was another one of those awkward silences. Finally, Chris just said, "Can we press play now? I want to see him blow up the helicopter." Paula gave him a look, a mix of disappointment and pity, and nodded. The rest of the movie was watched in near silence. The fun had been completely sucked out of the room. The educating started to become a regular feature of our get-togethers. If we were grilling burgers, she'd make a comment about the performative nature of male cooking outdoors. If someone mentioned buying a new power tool, she'd talk about how society pushes men into rigid, practical roles. Every conversation started to feel like a potential trap. We found ourselves self-censoring. The easy banter that defined our friendship started to die down. You'd think twice before telling a joke, wondering if it would be dissected for its problematic subtext. David started to change too. He became her gatekeeper. Before we'd all meet up, he'd send a text to our group chat. "Hey guys, just a heads up. Paula's a little stressed from work, so maybe we can keep the jokes a bit light tonight." Or he'd pull one of us aside after we said something she disapproved of. "Hey man, I know you didn't mean anything by it, but that comment about your female boss was a little, you know." He was trying to manage us, to make sure we didn't upset her. It felt less like he was our friend and more like he was her press secretary. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was the feeling that one of our own was now on the other side of that invisible line she had drawn. The rest of us started talking about it in private. Chris was the most vocal. "I can't stand it anymore," he told me one day. "It feels like I'm constantly being graded on my personality, and I'm always failing." I tried to be more diplomatic. I told him David was just trying to keep the peace. But deep down, I knew Chris was right. The breaking point for many of the other girlfriends in our circle happened during a birthday party for one of the guy's partners. It was a pretty big gathering, maybe 20 people. Paula somehow steered a conversation with a group of women toward the topic of relationships. I was standing nearby, getting a drink, and overheard her. She wasn't just chatting, she was holding court. She was talking about emotional labor and how women in heterosexual relationships are always expected to do more of it. How men are socialized to be emotionally stunted and unable to meet their partner's needs. She was speaking in these broad, sweeping generalizations, looking at the other women for agreement, but the other women just looked uncomfortable. One of them, Mike's girlfriend, tried to gently disagree. She said something like, "I don't know, Mike is pretty thoughtful. He always knows when I'm upset about something." Paula just smiled that same pitying smile and said, "That's nice, but that's an exception. We're talking about the systemic issue." She basically dismissed her friend's personal, positive experience in favor of her own grim narrative. You could see the goodwill just draining from the faces of the other women. They had come to a party to celebrate a friend, not to be told their boyfriends were emotionally deficient products of a toxic system. After that night, the group dynamics really fractured. The girls started making excuses not to come to group hangouts if they knew Paula would be there. And because the girls weren't coming, the guys started to bail too. Our big fun group gatherings dwindled. Soon it was often just me, Chris, David, and Paula. And those nights were the worst. With a smaller group, her focus was more intense. There was no escape. Every topic was a landmine. We tried to steer the conversation to safe, neutral ground. Sports? She'd find a way to talk about the gender pay gap in professional athletics. Video games? She'd analyze the problematic portrayal of female characters. We once spent 20 minutes talking about the weather, and it was the most relaxing conversation we'd had in months. Chris started to push back more directly. He was never rude, but he stopped letting her comments go unchallenged. They'd get into these low-key, passive-aggressive debates. She'd say something about toxic masculinity. Chris would reply, or maybe some guys just like fixing cars. It's not that deep. She'd accuse him of being defensive. He'd say he just wasn't interested in psychoanalyzing every single human action. David would just sit there, looking miserable, trying to play peacemaker. "Okay, guys, let's agree to disagree. How about another drink?" But the damage was already done. The atmosphere would be thick with tension for the rest of the night. I remember one particularly awful evening. We were at David and Paula's new apartment. They had just moved in together. We were helping them unpack some boxes and set up furniture. I made a comment about how David was surprisingly good at assembling IKEA furniture. I meant it as a compliment. Paula overheard and said, "It's interesting how we praise men for basic domestic competence, isn't it?" I was just stunned. I had no idea how to even respond to that. I was just trying to be nice to my friend. Chris, who was struggling with a particularly stubborn screw, just muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." Later, when David and I were alone in the kitchen getting glasses, I tried to talk to him. I said, "Hey man, is everything okay? Paula seems a bit on edge tonight." He got really defensive. He told me I didn't understand how much pressure she was under, how frustrating it is to be aware of all the injustice in the world and see no one else caring. He said we should be more open-minded and try to learn from her perspective. "She's just trying to make us better people, Eddie," he said. I didn't say anything else, but in my head, I was screaming, "We're not her students, we're your friends. We don't need to be made better. We just want to hang out." It was a gut punch. He didn't see it. He was so deep in it that he saw our discomfort as a character flaw on our part. He saw our desire for a relaxing, fun evening as ignorance. The chasm between us felt wider than ever. We stopped going over to their place. We stopped initiating plans. The group chat, once buzzing with memes and plans every day, went silent for days at a time. The core of our friendship, that effortless camaraderie, had been hollowed out. It was replaced by a sense of obligation and dread. Hanging out with David now felt like a chore. You had to mentally prepare yourself for the inevitable lecture, the inevitable awkwardness. Chris and I started hanging out just the two of us, or with the other guys who were also avoiding the Paula experience. We'd go for a beer and talk about how things used to be. It felt like we were mourning a friendship that wasn't technically over but felt dead anyway. We missed David. We missed the old David, the one who could just relax and be himself without analyzing every word that came out of his mouth. We knew something had to give. The whole situation was unsustainable. It felt like a Cold War. Everyone was pretending things were normal, but the tension was simmering just below the surface. We were just waiting for the inevitable explosion. And we didn't have to wait long. The event that finally blew everything up happened on a random weeknight, maybe a Tuesday. David had texted the group, asking if a few of us wanted to come over and play a new board game they had bought, a cooperative one, where we all played on the same team against the game itself. Chris and I were hesitant. We texted each other separately. "You want to go? I'm not really feeling it." "Me neither, but if we say no, David will know why." We felt a sense of duty to our friend. We couldn't just abandon him completely. So we agreed. It would just be the four of us, me, Chris, David, and Paula. The atmosphere in their apartment felt tense from the moment we walked in. It wasn't overtly hostile, just quiet, strained, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Paula explained the rules of the game. It was some fantasy thing, where we had to work together to defeat a series of monsters before they destroyed a kingdom. We started playing. For the first 20 minutes, it was actually okay. We were making moves, discussing strategy. It almost felt like old times. Then the difficulty ramped up. We were in a tough spot, with monsters about to overrun our main castle. We had to decide on a course of action. I suggested one move. David suggested another. Then Chris spoke up. "Hang on," he said, pointing at the board. "If I use my character's special ability here, and Eddie moves his character to protect the northern wall, we can survive this turn. It's risky, but it's our best shot." It was a solid plan, logical, purely strategic. Paula, who had been silent, let out a small, humorless laugh. "Of course," she said, not looking at anyone in particular. "The men have to come up with a big, risky plan." Chris put his game piece down. "What is that supposed to mean? I'm just trying to help us not lose." "It's just a classic pattern," she said, her voice taking on that familiar, condescending lecture tone. In group dynamics, men tend to dominate the decision-making process, especially when it comes to strategy or risk. It's a form of subconscious power assertion. The three of us just stared at her. I couldn't believe it. She was psychoanalyzing our board game moves. Chris, for the first time, looked genuinely angry, not just annoyed, angry. "It's a game, Paula," he said, his voice low and tight. "We're trying to move little plastic figures around a piece of cardboard. That's it. It has nothing to do with power assertion." "You're getting defensive," she shot back. "That's a typical male reaction to having your behavior pointed out." "I'm not being defensive," Chris's voice was rising now. I'm being logical. You're turning a fun night into a weird social experiment. We can't do anything without you turning it into a lesson about how we're all secretly terrible people. I never said you were terrible people, Paula said calmly, which only made Chris angrier. I'm just highlighting the toxic patterns we're all conditioned to follow. Toxic? You want to see toxic? Chris stood up, throwing his hands in the air. Toxic is making your friends feel like they have to apologize for existing every time they hang out with you. Toxic is sucking all the joy out of a room because you can't go 5 minutes without educating someone. We're just trying to have fun. All this time, David was just sitting there, frozen, looking down at the game board as if it held the answers to the universe. He didn't say a word. Paula stood up too. She looked at Chris with utter disdain. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Male rage, the inability to handle criticism without resorting to aggression. You're proving my entire point for me. That was it. Chris was done. He grabbed his jacket. I'm out of here. This is ridiculous. He looked at David, who still wouldn't meet his gaze. Thanks for having me over, man. The sarcasm was thick. Then he looked at me. I nodded. I was right behind him. I stood up and said, Yeah, I think we're gonna go. It's getting late. I couldn't even look at Paula. I just felt this profound sense of disappointment. As we were walking out the door, I glanced back at David. He finally looked up at me, and his face was just a mask of pure misery. He was caught in an impossible trap. We walked out, and the apartment door closed behind us. Neither of us said a word all the way down to the street. We just got in our cars and drove home in silence. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen notifications on my phone. Chris had created a new group chat. It was titled The Old Guard. It included everyone from our core group, except for David. The first message from Chris was simple. We need to talk. This can't go on. The chat immediately blew up. Everyone had been feeling the same way. Stories started pouring out about things Paula had said or done. The incident at the birthday party, the movie night, the BBQ comments. It was all out in the open now. It felt like a dam had broken. All the resentment and frustration we'd been swallowing for months was finally being voiced. We all agreed on 2 things. 1, we missed David, our friend. 2, we could no longer hang out with Paula. It was non-negotiable. The problem was, how could you have one without the other? We started organizing things in the new chat. A poker night here, a trip to the driving range there. Life started to feel normal again. We could joke around. We could be ourselves. But there was always a shadow hanging over us. David's absence was a huge hole in the group. About a week after the disastrous game night, David texted me. Hey, haven't heard from you guys. Everything okay? My heart sank. This was it, the moment of truth. I couldn't lie to him. I couldn't make up some lame excuse. He deserved the truth. Our friendship, what was left of it, deserved that much. I texted back, Can we meet up and talk? Just you and me. We met at a quiet coffee shop a couple of days later. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. We ordered coffee and sat down. For a minute, we just sat in silence. Finally, he asked, So, what's going on, Eddie? Did I do something? Why is everyone avoiding me? I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this in my head 100 times, trying to find the right words. David, nobody is avoiding you, I started. We're avoiding the situation. I laid it all out for him, calmly, without anger or blame. I told him how much we all valued his friendship, how he was like a brother to us. And then I told him how every single social event with him had become a source of stress and anxiety. It's Paula, I said. We can't do it anymore, man. I explained that being around her felt like being in a constant state of judgment. We're not allowed to just be ourselves. Every joke, every opinion, every hobby is put under a microscope and analyzed for being problematic. We come to hang out with our friend to relax, and instead, we walk into a 3-hour lecture on social theory. I told him about the secret group chat. I knew it would hurt him, but he needed to know the extent of the problem. We had to create a space where we could just be guys, like we used to be, without someone policing our conversations. He just listened, stirring his coffee, not looking at me. She's not a bad person, he finally said, his voice quiet. She's just passionate. She cares about things. I know she does, I said. But her passion is destroying our friendship. It's pushing everyone away. It's pushed us away. I looked him straight in the eye. It feels like she doesn't want to be our friend. It feels like she wants us to be her project, and we're not interested in being fixed. I leaned back. So that's it. That's what's going on. We miss you, but we can't hang out with you if it means we have to hang out with her. The group can't survive it. I had said my piece. The ball was in his court. He was silent for a long time. I just let him think. Finally, he nodded slowly. I hear you, he said. I need some time to process this. We paid for our coffee and left. We shook hands, and it felt formal and weird. I didn't know if I'd just saved our friendship or ended it for good. For the next few days, there was radio silence. I told the guys in the chat what had happened. We were all just waiting. Then, on a Friday evening, my phone rang. It was David. I answered, my stomach in knots. Hey, he said. His voice sounded different, lighter. Hey man, what's up? I just wanted to thank you, he said, for being honest with me. He told me that after our talk, he had tried to have a conversation with Paula. He calmly relayed our concerns. He didn't blame her, but he explained how her approach was making his oldest friends feel. He suggested that maybe she could tone it down a bit when she was around them. Her reaction was explosive. She accused him of taking their side against her. She told him that he was choosing his toxic, unenlightened friends over her. She said that if he couldn't see how problematic their behavior was, then he was part of the problem. He told me that in that moment, something just clicked. He said, "She wasn't listening to me, Eddie. She was diagnosing me. She looked at me, and she didn't see her boyfriend. She saw another man who needed to be educated." He realized we were right. He was just another one of her projects. "She told me I had to choose," David said. "Her or you guys." There was a pause. "So I chose," he said. "I packed a bag. We're done." I was speechless. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was mixed with sadness for him. Breakups are never easy. "I'm sorry, man," I said. "I'm really sorry it came to that." "Don't be," he said. "You just helped me see what was right in front of my face. I've been so stressed for so long, and I didn't even realize it. I feel free." We talked for a little while longer, and it was the most normal conversation we'd had in almost a year. The next night, I was at my place with Chris and a couple of the other guys. We were playing video games, just like old times. There was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there was David. He was holding a 12-pack of beer and had a sheepish grin on his face. We all just stared for a second. Chris was the one who broke the silence. He put his controller down and looked at David. "Took you long enough," he said, without a trace of anger. "We're stuck on this level. Get in here." Everyone started laughing. David walked in, and it was like he had never left. We didn't talk about Paula. We didn't do a big emotional debrief. We didn't need to. We just fell back into our old rhythm. The jokes, the banter, the easy comfort of it all. A few weeks later, we were all in my backyard for a BBQ. The sun was shining. The grill was going. It was the whole crew. Everyone was there. David was laughing at some stupid story Chris was telling. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. I took a sip of my drink and looked around at my friends. Our circle was whole again. We had weathered the storm. We had almost lost one of our own, but in the end, we got him back. The sanctuary was secure. We never heard from Paula again, and honestly, we never talked about her. It was like she was just a weird chapter in our lives that was now closed. She came into our group as the life of the party, but she left as just a lesson in how quickly you can lose sight of what's important when you're trying to fix a world that isn't broken.